He is the one and only. Officer on deck, Scott Ritter, welcome back to the mother of all talk shows. Let me ask you, first off, if I may, about this Mossad report. The numbers that are given are uncannily close to numbers that you yourself have predicted, including on this show. The numbers of the foreigners killed is slightly higher than I imagined. But do you think the numbers are accurate? And if you do you agree with the conclusion that Ukraine is close to a beaten military force?
I believe the numbers are actually conservative. The Mossad, as you said, they're a sharp outfit. I have personal not relationship, but I've worked with them in Israeli intelligence in general, and they aren't prone to wild speculation. So when they commit to a number, it's a number that they feel comfortable. But one of the problems with the battlefield in Ukraine is that the Ukrainian government has a habit, the Ukrainian army has a habit of abandoning bodies, and then the Ukrainian government doesn't effectively account for them. So I believe that that number of dead could easily be double the number that the Israelis have put out. And but in any case, I firmly support the conclusion that the Ukrainian military is a defeated army and that Ukraine as a nation state is a defeated nation. The Battle of Bakhmut is becoming the Stalingrad of this conflict, where both sides are pouring in resources and taking a geographical feature which, although important, doesn't have to be the decisive battle for Ukraine. There's more defensible terrain just to the west of Bakhmut with higher hills where you have better fields of fire, et cetera, that the Ukrainians could fall back on. But this battle has been going on since May, and both sides have committed significant resources. I mean, Ukraine has burned through anywhere between 14 and 20 brigades worth of troops. Brigade has 4,000 to 5,000. Each brigade is suffering about 90% casualties before they're withdrawn. You do the math. This has been a horrific fight for the Ukrainians, and there's a lot of political issues attached to this battle. So to lose this battle will be devastating from a morale standpoint for the Ukrainians, in addition to being a significant military defeat, one which they simply cannot bounce back from. Just to give you an example, again, General Zaluzhny, the commander of the Ukrainian armed forces, has been pressuring the West to provide him with 6 brigades worth of material. So he believes that 6 brigades could have an impact on the battlefield. Ukraine has burned through 14 to 20 brigades in the Battle of Bakhmut alone. That just shows you just how devastating this battle has been and what a defeat there will mean for the Ukrainian military.
What is 14 brigades for the uninitiated? How many soldiers do you think they've lost in Bakhmut?
A brigade, again, is between 4,000 and 5,000. Let's go with 4 because it's wartime and they may not get full complement. So, 4 times 14 is 76,000 troops. That's Marine math. I could be off here. I don't have my calculator, but 76,000. Then we take 90% casualties of that. And, we're basically talking around 68,000 casualties. Generally speaking, given what's going on in Ukraine, you're looking at about a 50-50 split. So that's 30,000 dead, 30,000 wounded.
Yeah, the reason I press you on that is that would actually meet the calculation that von der Leyen, when she said they had lost 100,000, and would tally with the Mossad prediction if they had lost that number since she opined in Bakhmut. That would almost give you exactly 154,000 dead. But as you say, we don't know exactly, and we oughtn't to dwell on maths that might be wrong. But I was asking you what would happen if they withdraw from Bakhmut or they are overrun and defeated in Bakhmut. Does that leave the southern part of Ukraine, the coastline and so on, virtually undefended?
Ukrainians have no more meaningful reserves. They have anywhere from 40 to 70,000 troops undergoing training right now in the West, but these troops haven't been fully trained, nor have they been equipped, and many of them won't be ready to be committed to this battle until sometime in May, June, July of this year. And when they are committed, they'll be committed piecemeal. So Ukraine is going to have to do with what they have on hand right now, and they have committed much of their reserves to the Bakhmut fight. But Russia is engaged in offensive operations along the entire length of the front lines, and so Ukraine is committing reserves to fighting in the Zaporizhia and Ulagder and in other places up in near Kharkov. So when Russia breaks through in any one of these areas, Ukraine will have insufficient forces to seal that gap, and then this will just begin a process of collapse. It's not that Ukraine won't have any defenders. They still have 200,000 men, but they'll be spread along a line so thinly that there's no way they can effectively defend against the mass of forces that Russia will be able to apply to the military problem. So it is literally game, set, match. There's no hope for Ukraine. Any wise civilian leader at this point in time would recognize that continued resistance is futile and seek to preserve as much human life and, frankly speaking, as much territorial integrity as he can with a negotiated peace settlement with the Russians.
To what do you attribute the new success of the Russian military operation? Is it just the increase in the number of men? Is it their superior firepower? Is it their apparently unending supply of ammunition, artillery? What are the main factors?
Well, let's remember that Russia had actually won this war back in June. A lot of people don't recognize that. They pretend not to pay attention to that. But when Russia consolidated its forces in the Donbass region, they were carrying out very effective offensive operations that were destroying the Ukrainians. What the Ukrainians had for them was the ability to bring 70,000 new troops who were pumped up with tens of billions of dollars of NATO equipment and create a new reality in the war that Russia had to then adapt to. And Russia has adapted to that. And so we're now in a phase where Russia has brought to bear overwhelming military force. Russia has always had a highly trained military. It's still the case. They now just have more of them dedicated. Russia's always had very good equipment. That's still the case. They just have more of it. And as you alluded to, Russia has nearly an endless supply of ammunition. And when you have a 10-to-1 artillery advantage, that's really all you need. And the Ukrainians this time simply don't have anything to match that. And that's where we're at today. I use basic military math I call burn rate versus replenishment rate. And right now, the Ukrainians are burning through resources, and they have a very low replenishment rate. The Russians, on the other hand, aren't burning through resources, and they have a massive replenishment rate. And logic tells you that the Russian equation is going to beat the Ukrainian equation every day of the week.
According to the Daily Mail in Britain today, the British Army would run out of ammunition in one single day if Britain was at war with Russia, which makes the belligerence of the British leadership all the more extraordinary. I'm debating at the Oxford Union next week, I think, with the Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, and the head of the British Army. It's a point I shall be making to them. They better bring their tin hats. But isn't there a gap, a crucial gap, between the rhetoric of America's allies and their actual ability to bring anything to the fight?
As I said earlier, General Zaluzhny said he needed 6 brigades to carry out what he deemed to be an effective offensive operation in a very narrow sector of the front. Great Britain today would have trouble mobilizing 2 brigades in its entire military. 2 brigades, its entire military. You could take one of the big soccer stadiums in England, fill it up with the British Army, you'll still have 30,000 empty seats. So it's not that it's just they would run out of ammunition in a day, they would run out of manpower in a week. The British Army would no longer exist 1 week into a war of the intensity that's been going on in Ukraine today. And it's not just the British Army. The German Army can't get out of the barracks. The French Army can't get out of the barracks. NATO can't get out of the barracks. So, the most effective fighting force right now in Europe is the United States Army from the NATO perspective, and we don't have enough of them. I mean, we had 300,000 troops during the Cold War, immediately reinforceable with 250,000. We have now 100,000, and that's pretty much all we can bring to bear to this problem. We don't have any more. And so it reminds me of the Top Gun movie where, the air combat commander turns to Maverick and says, son, your mouth is writing checks your body can't cash. And that's exactly what I'm telling NATO. Your mouths are writing checks your bodies can't cash. You don't have the resources. Moreover, you don't have the military industrial capacity to build the equipment you would need for the resources, and you don't have the manpower. Meanwhile, because of your actions, the Russian military is now expanding to 1.5 million. They have a defense industry that's chugging on all cylinders, producing the world's best military equipment. NATO just made the Russian problem even by orders of magnitude more difficult for them, and they don't have a solution. They should shut up about war, start embracing a negotiated peace settlement, seeking a long-term European security framework that has peaceful coexistence as the goal, not this ridiculous dream of somehow Western domination of Russia. Isn't going to happen.
All hat and no cattle. The dog that hasn't barked in this conflict is Belarus. We keep hearing that forces are massing in Belarus and so on. Do you expect that front to open at any stage?
If the front does open, given the current set of circumstances, it will be only Russian troops that go in, I believe. Belarus's President Lukashenko has been quite consistent that he does not want his troops going to war against Ukraine. But if Ukraine attacks Belarus, or, and this is probably the most likely scenario, Poland seeks to enter Belarus, then Belarus, together with Russia and this very powerful joint group of forces they've built up, will respond decisively. And those are the conditions I think you will see. Again, Belarus has said from day one, their job is to protect Russia from being stabbed in the back by NATO. So while Russia is focused on Ukraine, Belarus's job is to hold Poland and the Baltic states in check. And they've done a very good job of that. And that's their continued mission. But now they have to guard against the potential of a Polish sortie into Western Ukraine. And if the Poles do this, they will be defeated decisively by this joint Belarus-Russian military group.
Now, I can't let you go, Scott, not least for nostalgic reasons of when we first started to cross each other's paths and effectively ending in acting in concert, trying to stop the absolute cataclysm and disaster that the Iraq War became. It's 20 years ago today since Colin Powell's famous appearance at the Security Council of the United Nations, holding his little vial of weapons, biological weapons, which he said could wipe out the world or begin the wiping out of the world. I was enraged all over again when I saw the anniversary pictures today. How did you feel about it? And how did you feel at the time when you saw him do it?
Well, George, as you said, you and I go back a long way. And I remember when you invited me to march alongside you in London to Hyde Park and speak. And I remember telling you how uncomfortable that made me, how very uncomfortable that made me. But because of the importance of the cause, I put away my personal discomfort and joined you in a noble cause. Yeah. And it's a cause that you and I don't think people understand the sacrifices you made and I made toward trying to stop this war. We were attacked viciously. They came at us from every angle possible. But, the truth will out. We did well, I think, in terms of integrity and message. Yeah. I was in Japan when Colin Powell gave his presentation. I was actually trying to speak to remember, going the extra mile. I was speaking to the Japanese parliament, trying to get them to vote against their willingness to provide support to an invasion of Iraq. And I was speaking for the International Press Club, and we delayed the presentation so I could watch Colin Powell's speech. And what I said at the time, immediately after watching, is that every word he said was a lie. Every single word he said was a lie. And how did I feel? I had the highest respect for Colin Powell before that. I mean, I've known him for a long time. He's backed me up many times during the war, during my inspection regime, etc. And to watch him debase himself like that for a cause that he knew was wrong was just, it sickened me to see the Secretary of State of the United States lie before the international community. And I will tell this today. I had hoped prior to that my government could maintain a modicum of integrity and honor and dignity. From that moment on, my government has been known to me as only a government of lies. Everything we say is a lie. And this is documented proof. We don't tell the truth anymore about anything. And you can compare and contrast what went on there with Colin Powell standing before the world trying to scare them about weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist with what's going on today, where the United States is trying to scare the world about a Russian threat that doesn't exist. Lies, lies, lies. It sickened me then, sickens me to this day.
You're an officer and a gentleman. Thank you, Scott Ritter, as always, for joining us.